Look at that pile. That is 20 bulbs of garlic grown from a single clove. Not 20 small ones either. Proper fist-sized, papery-skinned, heavy bulbs that will keep for months. And the strange part, the part that took me 15 years to understand, is that the secret to getting that pile was not in the soil, not in the fertilizer, and not in some exotic seed catalog. It was in a technique so old and so simple that most gardening advice completely ignores it. Because if you know it, you will never buy garlic again. The reason you have likely never heard of this is honestly kind of annoying. It works too well and costs too little for anyone to sell it to you. Think about it. The seed companies want you to buy new bulbs every year. The garden centers want you to buy fertilizers and sprays and special raised bed kits. Nobody makes money when you snap one clove off a kitchen bulb, stick it in the ground in the fall, and pull 20 full heads out the next summer. There is no profit in that. So the information gets buried under a mountain of complicated advice about pH levels and scape removal and curing rooms. But the core truth, the actual mechanism that makes one clove explode into 20, it is ancient. The Egyptians fed it to pyramid builders for strength. Roman soldiers carried it in their packs. And every single one of them understood the same simple trick that I am going to show you right now. I know exactly what you might be thinking right now. You have tried to grow garlic before. You bought a nice-looking bulb at the farmer's market, broke it apart, poked the cloves into the ground, and waited. And what did you get? Maybe a few small round bulbs. Maybe some scrawny plants that yellowed and died. Or maybe you got nothing at all, just a bare patch of dirt where the cloves rotted away over the winter. Hand on heart, how many of you have done exactly that? Planted grocery store garlic in the spring and wondered why it never amounted to anything. I did it too. For years I thought I just did not have the touch. I thought garlic was one of those crops that required some special fertilizer regime or a particular soil type that my garden just did not have. I stopped trying for a while. I just accepted that I would buy my garlic from the store like everyone else. That frustration is the real problem. Not the garlic. The garlic knows exactly what to do. It has been doing it for thousands of years without any help from us. The problem is that we have been given the wrong instructions. We have been told to treat garlic like a tomato or a pepper, something you plant in warm spring soil and push hard through the summer. But garlic is not a summer crop. It is a winter crop. And if you plant it at the wrong time in the wrong way, you are fighting against its natural cycle instead of working with it. That is the whole idea. You work with the plant, not against it. Before I show you the trick, let me just be clear about what does not work, because I have tried all of it. First, planting in the spring. This is the most common mistake, and it is the reason most people fail. Spring-planted garlic never gets the cold period it needs to trigger bulb formation. The plant just grows leaves and then gives up when the heat arrives. You get tiny, undifferentiated rounds or nothing at all. Second, planting grocery store garlic without knowing what you are buying. Most supermarket garlic is softneck, often treated with growth inhibitors to keep it from sprouting in the store. It has been shipped from another climate, stored for months, and it is often a variety that simply will not thrive in your garden. Third, overfeeding with nitrogen. People pour on the fertilizer trying to force big bulbs, and they get lots of green top growth in small bulbs. It is like feeding a marathon runner nothing but sugar. Looks energetic, but the foundation is weak. Fourth, and this one hurts, planting the smallest cloves. You know the ones. The little skinny slivers in the center of the bulb. People think, well, I will save the big cloves for cooking and plant the little ones. That is exactly backwards. The size of the clove you plant directly determines the size of the bulb you harvest. Small clove, small bulb. Every single time. So what is the actual trick? What did the old gardeners know that we have forgotten? My neighbor, Mrs. Kowalska, she finally told me after watching me struggle for years. She has been growing the same garlic for over 30 years. Her garden is legendary in the neighborhood. Every July she hangs these enormous braids of garlic in her garage, and the smell, honestly, it is incredible. One evening I was helping her move some bags of soil, and I asked her, point blank, how do you get bulbs that size? She looked at me for a second, smiled, and said something I will never forget. She said the garlic is not the seed. The clove is the seed. And like every seed, it needs a season. That was it. That was the whole secret. It sounds so simple, but it unlocked everything. The clove is not a bulb. It is a seed. And a seed has a specific job to do. It needs to be planted at the right time in the right orientation and left alone to do its work. The trick is not one thing. It is a sequence of small, precise actions that align with the garlic's natural instincts. And the first, most important action, the one that nobody tells you, is when you plant it. You plant in the fall, not late summer, not early spring. Though, specifically 4 to 6 weeks before the ground freezes hard. For most of the United States, that means October. In warmer climates, November. In the deep south, you can push it to December. The goal is to get the clove into the soil early enough that it grows a small root system before winter, but late enough that it does not send up a green shoot above the soil line. A little root growth is perfect. A green shoot is not a disaster, but it makes the plant work harder. You want it to go into winter with its feet settled, ready to explode in the spring. Now the clove itself. This is where the 20 bulbs from one clove thing really starts to make sense. You take one healthy bulb and you separate it into individual cloves. But here is the part that most people skip. You do not just grab any clove. You select the largest, plumpest, most perfect cloves from the outside of the bulb. These are the ones with the most stored energy. These are the marathon runners. The small interior cloves, the ones that look a bit wrinkled or skinny, those go into the kitchen for cooking. Plant the best, eat the rest. That is the rule. And every year, you save the best bulbs from your harvest to plant the next fall. Over a few years, you are selectively breeding garlic that is perfectly adapted to your specific garden, your soil, your climate. That is what Mrs. Kowalska did. That is why her garlic is so good. It has been trained generation after generation to thrive in her backyard. So you have your large cloves. Now the cost. Let me just anchor this for you right now because it is absurd. A single bulb of good organic garlic from a farmer's market costs maybe $2 or $3. That bulb will have 8 to 12 large cloves. Each clove planted correctly will produce a bulb with 15 to 20 cloves. So one $3 bulb one season gives you up to 200 cloves. 200 plants. The next year, those 200 plants give you 4,000 cloves. The math gets stupid fast. You will never buy garlic again. And the total cost of the soil amendment I am going to recommend is less than a single coffee from a vending machine. Let me just show you. The part list is embarrassingly short. You need one bulb of good garlic. That is it. Everything else is already in your shed or your kitchen. You need a trowel. You need some compost, any kind, homemade is fine. And you need a bag of plain, untreated wood ash. That is the secret ingredient. Wood ash, the stuff left over from a campfire or a fireplace. If you do not have a fireplace, you can buy a small bag of hardwood ash for a few dollars, or you can ask a neighbor who burns wood. It is not a fertilizer. It is not a pesticide. It is simply the missing mineral that garlic craves. Let me explain the build, the planting, step by step, because the order matters. First, choose your spot. Garlic wants full sun at least 6 hours a day. It wants well-drained soil. If your soil is heavy clay, mix in some compost to loosen it up. Garlic will rot if it sits in water all winter. That is the #1 killer. Not cold. Cold is fine. Wet is not. So pick a spot that does not collect puddles. If you are not sure, plant on a slight mound a few inches high. That is a trick I learned the hard way after losing an entire bed to a wet winter. Second, prepare the bed. Loosen the soil to about 8 inches deep. Mix in a generous amount of compost. Garlic is a heavy feeder, but it wants slow, steady nutrition, not a chemical spike. Compost gives it exactly that. Then, and this is the step nobody tells you, sprinkle a thin layer of wood ash over the bed and lightly work it into the top inch of soil. A little goes a long way. 1 small handful per square yard is plenty. Do not overdo it. Wood ash is alkaline and garlic prefers a slightly alkaline soil. It also adds potassium and trace minerals that directly contribute to bulb size. This is the old way. This is what people did before there were bags of synthetic fertilizer with 3 numbers on the front. They threw the ashes from the wood stove onto the garden. It works. Third, and this is the most important part of the entire process, the orientation of the clove. Take your large, healthy clove. Look at it. It has a flat bottom, the basal plate, where the roots will grow. It has a pointy top where the shoot will emerge. You plant it pointy side up. Flat side down. About 2 inches deep, measured from the top of the clove to the soil surface. Not 4 inches. Not 6. 2 inches. If you plant too deep, the shoot wastes energy pushing through soil and the bulb forms smaller. If you plant too shallow, the clove can heave out of the ground during freeze-thaw cycles in the winter. 2 inches. Pointy side up. I know it sounds obvious, but I have seen people plant cloves sideways, upside down, you name it. The plant will usually figure it out, but it wastes time and energy, and that translates directly into smaller bulbs. Do not waste the plant's time. Give it the correct starting position. Fourth, spacing. This is where the 20 bulbs thing really takes off. Each clove needs room to grow a full-sized bulb. Space them 6 inches apart in rows that are 12 inches apart. That gives each plant about half a square foot of space. If you crowd them, you get small bulbs. If you give them room, they reward you. A single 4-foot by 8-foot raised bed, planted at this spacing, holds about 64 plants. That is 64 bulbs from maybe 4 or 5 planting bulbs. You see where this is going. Fifth, and this is the part that feels wrong but is absolutely critical, stop. Do not water. Do not fertilize. Do not fuss. After you plant in the fall, you give the bed a light watering to settle the soil around the cloves, and then you walk away. Let the rain do its thing. Let the cold come. The garlic is not dead. It is waiting. It is building roots. It is counting the cold days, literally. Garlic needs a period of cold, called vernalization, to trigger the formation of multiple cloves inside the bulb. Without that cold period, the plant will grow one single round bulbs like an onion. The cold is not an enemy. It is the signal that tells the garlic, okay, winter is here, spring is coming. It is time to divide and multiply. That is the whole idea. The cold is the trigger for the 20 cloves. Now what about the spring? When the weather warms and the shoots start to grow, you have a few simple jobs. First, if you mulch the bed with straw in the fall, which is a good idea in very cold climates, you can pull the mulch back from the shoots so they get full sun. Second, and this is a trick that really does boost bulb size, remove the scapes. The scape is the curly, pigtail-shaped flower stalk that hardneck garlic sends up in late spring. If you leave it, the plant puts energy into making seeds instead of making a bulb. If you cut it off, that energy goes straight into the bulb. The bulbs can be 20 to 30% larger just from removing the scape. And the scapes themselves are delicious. Chop them up and use them like garlic chives. Stir-fry pesto scrambled eggs. Nothing is wasted. Third, and this is the last real rule, stop watering when the leaves start to yellow. That is usually in early to mid-summer. The plant is telling you it is finishing up. If you keep watering at that point, you encourage rot and you dilute the flavor. Let the soil dry out. Let the plant mature. The science here is actually pretty beautiful. A garlic clove is a storage organ. It is packed with carbohydrates and nutrients, all the energy the plant needs to start growing. When you plant it in the fall, it sends out roots and begins to absorb water and minerals. But the real magic happens when the cold hits. The cold triggers a hormonal change in the plant. It tells the meristem, the growing point, to switch from producing leaves to producing lateral buds. Those lateral buds become the individual cloves. The number of cloves is determined by the variety and the amount of cold it received. More cold, more cloves. That is why garlic grown in the north often has more cloves than garlic grown in the south. It is not a mystery. It is just botany. The wood ash, meanwhile, is doing something specific. Garlic bulbs are heavy feeders of potassium. Potassium is the mineral that regulates water movement in the plant and is directly involved in the formation of storage compounds. When garlic has plenty of potassium, it builds bigger, denser cloves. Wood ash is about 5 to 7% potassium by weight, and it is in a form that is immediately available to the plant. It also contains calcium, which strengthens the cell walls and improves the storage life of the bulbs. That is why garlic grown with wood ash tends to keep longer in your pantry. It is not magic. It is minerals. But the effect feels like magic. Now let me tell you about my first year doing this properly. I had a raised bed that previously grew tomatoes, and the soil was decent but not amazing. I mixed in a wheelbarrow of leaf compost, sprinkled a thin layer of ash from my fire pit, and planted 40 cloves of a hardneck variety called Music. I planted on October 15th, which was about 5 weeks before my ground usually freezes. I covered the bed with a thin layer of straw, just enough to keep the soil from heaving, not enough to smother it. And then I waited. All winter the bed looked dead. Just straw and snow. In March the first green shoots came up. By May the plants were 2 feet tall and thick as leeks. In June the scapes curled. I cut them all and made pesto. And in July the leaves started to yellow. I stopped watering. 2 weeks later I dug up the first bulb. It was enormous, the size of a softball. I weighed it. 6 ounces. 6 ounces from a single clove. I counted the cloves. 18. 18 full, plump, beautiful cloves from one clove that cost me maybe 30 cents. And the flavor, I have to tell you, it was unlike any garlic I had ever bought in a store. Hot, complex, almost sweet when roasted. It was the same variety, but it tasted like a different vegetable entirely. The results scale fast. That first year I planted 40 cloves and harvested 40 bulbs, averaging about 15 cloves each. That is 600 cloves of garlic. From 40 cloves. The next year I planted the best 80 cloves from those bulbs, and I harvested 80 bulbs, some of which had 20 cloves or more. I gave garlic away to neighbors, to friends, to the mail carrier. I braided it and hung it in my garage. I roasted whole bulbs and spread them on bread. I fermented cloves in honey. I still have garlic from that harvest over a year later, and it is still firm and potent. That is the part that gets me every time. This is not a one-season trick. It is a permanent addition to your garden and your kitchen. It is a system that pays you back every single year. Now I have to mention the one thing that can go wrong, because I want you to succeed. Do not buy garlic from the grocery store and assume it will work. It might, but it might also be a softneck variety from California that will not survive your winter. Or it might be treated with a sprout inhibitor, or it might carry a disease that will infect your soil for years. The safe move is to buy planting garlic from a local farmer's market, a local seed company, or a reputable online supplier that specializes in garlic. Look for hardneck varieties if you live in a cold climate. They are more cold-hardy and they produce the scapes. Look for softneck varieties if you live in a warm climate. They store longer and they do not need as much cold. Pay the extra few dollars for good planting stock. It is a one-time investment. After that, you save your own. Another thing, crop rotation. Do not plant garlic in the same bed year after year. Diseases can build up in the soil. Move it around. A 3-year rotation is ideal. Garlic, then beans, then tomatoes, then back to garlic. This is old farmer wisdom and it works. And one more. Patience. This is not a quick crop. You plant in October and you harvest in July. 9 months. That is longer than a human pregnancy. You have to be willing to wait. But the waiting is the point. The waiting is what makes the bulb grow. There is no shortcut. You cannot rush garlic. You can only align yourself with its schedule. So here is where we are. The secret is out. The trick nobody told you is not a trick at all. It is a timing. It is a selection. It is a handful of wood ash. It is planting a large clove, pointy side up, in the fall and letting the cold do its work. It is cutting the scape in the spring and stopping the water in the summer. It is saving the best for next year, year after year, until your garlic is so adapted to your garden that it grows itself. That is the whole idea. The thing that gets me every time is how close this knowledge came to being lost. For most of human history, this was not secret knowledge. It was just what you did. Everyone grew garlics. Everyone knew when to plant and when to harvest. It was as basic as knowing when to come in from the rain. Then we moved to cities, and we started buying our food from supermarkets, and the old knowledge faded. Now we are left with a generation of gardeners who think garlic is hard to grow, because nobody told them the simple rules. Well, now you know. You are the keeper of the old knowledge now. You have a responsibility to pass it on. So here is my ask. If this made sense to you, if you are already picturing that pile of 20 bulbs on your kitchen counter, then do something. Plant a clove. Just one. This fall. In a pot on a balcony, in a corner of your garden, anywhere. Watch what happens. And when it works, when you dig up that first enormous bulb next summer, tell someone. Show them. Give them a clove from your harvest and tell them to plant it in October, pointy side up, 2 inches deep with a little wood ash. That is how the knowledge survives. Not through videos like this, but through gardeners sharing with gardeners. Like Mrs. Kowalska shared with me. And if you want to see more of this kind of thing, the old ways that still work better than anything you can buy in a store, then subscribe to this channel. I am not selling anything. There is no product at the end of this. Just the satisfaction of knowing that you can grow your own food, that you are not dependent on the grocery store for something as fundamental as garlic. That is a kind of freedom that nobody can take away from you. And it starts with a single clove. Plant the best, eat the rest. See you in the gardens.